Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 317. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are here this week to review and discuss 2024's Out of My Mind. Admittedly, this is a pivot for us. We did say that we were going to review last year's theatrical releases. However, both Mufasa and Moana 2 have not gone to the streamer yet. Streaming anywhere, actually. And that's a stark contrast to where we were just a couple of years ago, where it seemed like things were getting put into theaters, and then within 6 weeks, they were somewhere on a streaming service.
If we're being honest, though, even if they were available to rent from a different service, we would not pay for either of those films to review. Sorry, listeners. We love you, but we have standards.
Yeah, now I will say we've only seen one of them. We only saw one, but of the one we saw, and anybody that's been with us for a while could figure out which one we didn't see. Yeah, we weren't going to pay for that. But I was interested to sit and watch this film because it was one that you kind of heard about. It was in the back of your mind. You'd seen the tile advertised on Disney Plus for like 12 hours. It felt like an indie film. Like, it just kind of felt like those movies, like one of those films that you heard about, but you didn't know a lot about.
So that was why I had suggested this as an alternative, because you're right. I remember it being a buzzy film despite not having a theatrical release. But the reason being is because this was actually a middle grade novel by Sharon M. Draper that was adapted to film, and it had its debut at Sundance Film Festival last year. So it had a lot of notoriety going in, and that's why it was the Thanksgiving drop for the streamer, because that's usually, it's a big weekend for theatrical releases, but dropping on the streamer Thanksgiving weekend is kind of the equivalent of a big drop in theaters.
Well, and Disney Plus has been known in the last few years, I mean, really since its inception, right, to doing a major Disney Plus original drop the week of Thanksgiving, something at least leading into December. Well, was that a mistake? Should this have gone straight to the streamer? Should it have gone to theaters? Should they have released this instead of Mufasa? Oh, I guess I told you which one we saw in theaters and how we feel about it. That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crew neck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all of the collections.
It is 2002, and we meet Melody Brooks, a 12-year-old with cerebral palsy. She is nonverbal and uses a pad with symbols and letters to communicate. She loves Jennifer Aniston so much that she chooses her voice to be her inner monologue. Due to being nonverbal, communicating with her family, her sister Penny, her father Chuck, her mother Diane, can be a bit of a struggle, especially when her parents are too distracted or exhausted to pay attention. Melody is in special ed as a 6th grader, however, her father feels that she has exceeded her ceiling. One day, Melody meets Catherine Ray, a postdoctoral fellow with a PhD in education, who introduces a program that would bring Melody into what you would call, quote-unquote, a regular classroom. Her father sees the value in moving her into the class, while school administrators and her mother feel that moving her out of special ed would not be fair to Melody, her new teacher, or to the other students. Mrs. V, Her next-door neighbor, with a big affinity for Melody, sees the paperwork for the program on the kitchen counter in the Brooks home and starts to talk about how great it is because she assumes that she's already been enrolled in the program, but Diane writes her off and tells her that a choice has not yet been made. Melody communicates to Mrs. V that she wants to be in the class, and Mrs. V encourages her to advocate for herself. Despite Diane's vocal objections, Chuck signs Melody up for the program. Catherine introduces Melody and her classmate Willie into Mr. Dimming's history class, and while Melody knows her history, her new classmates and teacher struggle with her inclusion in the program. Melody meets Rose, a girl who is patient and lets Melody communicate with her. Melody invites Rose to attend a space exhibit with her family at the local university, but becomes upset when Rose wanders off to say hi to friends that she sees and leaves Melody behind. Melody goes into a theater and watches a film on Stephen Hawking, and her father decides to look into getting her a Meditalker. Very similar, well, it's the exact same device that Stephen Hawking had. However, it is cost prohibitive, and insurance won't cover it without a doctor's assessment. The insurance company's doctor will not approve the device. However, due to a loophole in the wording, Catherine signs off and Melody is granted her Meditalker. At school, Mr. Dimmings announces tryouts for the Whiz Kids, a school trivia team. Catherine encourages Melody to program sayings into the device that reflect her feelings and her personality as opposed to what the pre-programmed phrases are. Melody offers to help Rose study for Whiz Kids by using the trivia game that is pre-programmed on the Meditalker. Mr. Dimmings, meanwhile, is hesitant, but allows Melody to try out for Whiz Kids. Rose tries to introduce Melody into her friend circle, but Claire, one of her friends, dismisses her at every turn. After inadvertently offending Melody, Rose invites her to the mall. They hang out, they laugh, they cause mischief. They are typical 12-year-old sixth graders. In fact, it's the first time that Melody has been able to be the sixth grader that she has always longed to be. When the Whiz Kids roster is announced, Melody is devastated to learn that she did not make the team despite knowing that she aced the test to get onto the team. Her parents promise to get involved, but Melody does not want them to, as she knows that it would push Rose off the roster and to the alternates list, because only 4 kids can go as a part of the starting roster, and Rose scored the lowest of the 4. However, upon review, they learn that Melody's answer sheet was 100% correct, but Mr. Dimmings never graded her test, so the school has no choice but to allow Melody onto the team, infuriating Rose, who is pushed to that alternates list. The school bans Catherine from returning to the classroom, as she tarnished Dimmings' reputation because she was the one that was the whistleblower. She went into the desk, and she was the one that found that the test had not been graded. They also say that it would cost the district more money, as they would need to integrate more special ed students into their quote-unquote regular classrooms. Melody tries to apologize to Rose, who tells her that she was only friends with her because her parents bribed her with the newest and latest, greatest invention, the iPod. At Whiz Kids Regional Finals, the Spalding Elementary team ends up in sudden death and selects Melody as their representative. She wins the game for her school and sends the team to the national championship in Washington, D.C. Despite winning, the team makes no mystery behind the fact that they still don't accept Melody. On the day of their flight, a storm cancels the initial takeoff, so the team gets moved to an earlier flight. However, Melody and her family find out last, as she was excluded from the team breakfast earlier that day. In spite of their best efforts, the Brooks family does not make the flight, and Melody does not go to nationals and does not get to compete. Out of frustration, Melody spills a milkshake on the Meditalker in an effort to ruin it. As her mother is very frustrated with Melody for what she has done, because the Meditalker was very expensive and very difficult to get. She scolds Melody as she is backing out of her driveway. Because Melody does not have the Medi-Talker, and because her mother is borderline hysterical, she is ignoring Melody, despite the fact that Melody is trying to tell her mother that her little sister Penny is behind the minivan that her mother is backing out of the driveway. And her mother inadvertently hits little Penny with the van. Thankfully, it's just bumps and scrapes, and Penny is going to be okay. And her mother informs Melody that even her mother makes mistakes all of the time. And Melody has a voice, and she tried to use it, and once again, she was ignored, and that was wrong. The Medi-Talker is spared. However, upon their return to school, Melody goes back to her class, calls out her teacher and her classmates for what they've done, and declares that she will remain in the classroom despite her program ending and being canceled by the school district.
Let's talk about this, because I've been so excited for this discussion. You have been chomping at the bit for this. I've not seen you so excited to record in a hot minute. That's not to say that we don't look forward to doing the show, but this was just like a different level. And I feel like we've barely talked to each other this week because
I've done that intentionally.
Yeah, no, seriously. I've been so excited to talk about this. I was afraid it was going to spoil our discussion, so I feel like we've been avoiding each other so as not to ruin this.
I mean, look, there are certain things that we come across every now and again. The Cat from Outer Space is a great example of a movie that I had no hope for and was so pleasantly surprised. I have not been this, just to give you a context as to something that we had never seen that I fell in love with. Yeah, there's my spoiler, folks. You know what? You got my whole review right off the rip. Something that I had never seen before that I fell so in love with that I couldn't wait to talk about it. It has been years. I have not been this excited to sit and talk about a film since we reviewed The Absent-Minded Professor. That was a long time ago. If I remember,
it had to be 3 or 4 years at least.
I want to say we were still in the apartment in New York.
Definitely.
I think it was before we moved here.
Definitely.
I have not been this excited to talk about a film that I have fallen so in love with since then. So I intentionally went out of my way to not discuss it with you because I wanted the conversation to be so real. I think part of this has to do with the time period, right? It takes place in 2002.
Yeah, so the nostalgia factor alone.
Through the roof, right? The fact that she picks Jennifer Aniston to be her inner voice because Melody loves Friends. I mean, we all know, people of our generation know what a big deal Friends was. The new generation at times doesn't understand Friends. At times they're oddly offended by it. They don't understand what a phenomenon this show was. So it was so nice to kind of go back and dip my toe in the water nostalgically. So like hits me right in the feels from the moment the film starts.
It does. And a lot comes at you very fast. I want to break this down, really specifically, because for those that haven't seen it, it's just such an incredible setup because you have a straight on shot of Melody in her wheelchair. It's the first thing that you see, and the camera is just pushing into her face. And then you hear the voiceover start. And I thought to myself, that's Jennifer Aniston? Because her voice is just uncanny. So then you realize it's her. As they're hitting you with a very almost outlandish joke for the visual that you have in front of you.
Yeah.
So they hit you with the comedy up front because what she says is, "Hi, I'm Melody." I think she gives her age and whatnot.
Yeah.
And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can sponsor me.
Yeah. It's so good.
And then she's like, "Nah, I'm just kidding." It's so jarring and so funny, but more importantly, so smart to put the comedy up front and hook you in so that you're not already starting to feel sorry for her and her condition, because that's the whole point of this film, is to empathize with her, not to sympathize for her. And just the way that they bring it all together, and then they bake Jennifer Aniston right into the story, not just having her as this omniscient narrator. It's just so brilliant and so well done.
Yeah, I think it's also a very tasteful way of introducing what CP is.
Yeah.
Because you see somebody, I think a lot of people see somebody with CP in a wheelchair. They obviously know that there's a disability, but I don't think they understand. Part of me, I'll even admit, part of me didn't quite understand what that disability was. So to put it in context of, I'm extraordinarily conscious of what I think, how I feel, what I see, but I have the inability to communicate it. Not only does it make it incredibly approachable, not only does it break it down in a way that's extraordinarily simple to understand, you feel so horrible for this young girl that she knows exactly what she wants to be. She knows exactly what she wants to say, but through no fault of her own, all she lacks is the ability to say it. It's so beautifully done.
That's the most tragic part about this. I would even dare say it's a disease almost, because, and my cousin does have CP, and that's the most I will say about it, because I'm not, it's one thing to talk about myself. I'm not going to exploit my family in a public forum. But I do have experience dealing with this. And that's the most frustrating thing, is to know that they are so aware of their condition.
Yeah.
And that's what this setup is doing so well, by getting us into this POV in an approachable way. And the way that they managed to strike that balance by making it relatable, peppering in comedy, but at the same time never allowing us to forget what her condition is, and that, we can't fully understand unless you have CP. You can't fully understand, but they're going to give us as best an understanding as they can. It's just incredible. So we get a little bit more voiceover, and Melody, we learn that Melody likes to make lists. Very relatable. But she's making a list about her wants, and it's something that we can't even wrap our mind around. And it's funny because she says, I see a lot of butts, because that's what her eye level is. And yes, it's a funny line, but that's the success of the writing here, where we're laughing with her, not at her. And I think it's worth mentioning up top too, how great of a screenplay this is, because I can only imagine if you're reading this in first person when you're reading the book, it's sort of easier to get into the POV, but I think they did such a wonderful job of translating that to the screen and still getting you into her mindset. One of the other things that's really relatable is that she has a goldfish, and they got that for her. Her parents got that for her because a dog is too much work. How many kids heard that growing up, that really wanted a dog, but their parents, weren't able to take on the added responsibility of having, a large pet that needs a lot more care. So you got a goldfish instead. I was that person. We had fish growing up. So again, they give you something relatable. However, they layer her condition in, because the voiceover is saying, go ahead, go fetch, as he's swimming around the tank. And there's just like a disappointment of, it's something that's so beyond her reach. So it's just layered with I don't necessarily want to say sadness, because I know that's not the point of what they're trying to do. They're not trying to make us pity her or feel sorry for her. But again, it's just that balance of making this character relatable and constantly reminding us that the simplest things are a struggle for her.
The scene with the goldfish is great, because it introduces the idea. Ollie is the name of the fish.
Mm-hmm.
As the parents are getting into the car, Diane's getting ready to take Penny to school. Chuck is outside, I think carrying a backpack, whatever it is he's doing, saying goodbye. Ollie jumps out of his bowl, out of his tank, and Melody is unable to call to anybody that Ollie's out of the bowl, out of the tank. So as she's trying to save him, she's splashing water out of the tank and drops the tank on the floor. And all Chuck knows when he comes in is the tank's on the floor, Ollie's on the floor. Now he has to save Ollie, which he does, clean up the mess, and now drive Melody to school because she was going to miss the bus. And he starts scolding her in a very cruel way, where he is introduced as a jerk.
Yeah.
But he's not a jerk for very long, because, and this has nothing to do with the apology that he gives her.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the fact that you know, and you see on his face how strained he is.
Yep.
Being the parent, having to, I don't want to say deal with, because it sounds like a harsh term. Living with, knowing that your daughter has this condition, that she can't speak for herself, that she can't live the life of what an average 12-year-old girl would be. So you see the pain, you see the frustration, you see tired, you see haggard. And while you're initially upset that he lashes out for her and you're upset on her behalf, you also feel so much sympathy, because these parents are going through a hell that is almost unbearable.
That's exactly what I mean by this film comes at you fast, because this is within like the first 3 minutes of screen time.
Yep.
You know, you barely get your mind around this incredible opening voiceover and what they're giving us up front. And I was not expecting this much action to happen. This whole scene with Ollie jumping is just so heartbreaking from top to bottom for me. To see at first that she can't articulate what's happening because she can't save Ollie. Then it's doubly frustrating because she can't even call for help. And she's doing everything she can, watching her best friend die in front of her. And she knows that she's ultimately powerless to save him. The whole thing, it's just so incredibly heartbreaking, and also so incredibly brilliant in the writing, because you just want to scream for her. And that was when I had stopped and texted you, because you had watched it before you went to work and I watched it while you were at work, and I went, oh my God, this movie. I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, and I was just completely blown away in this one scene. And I was like, oh, okay, strap in, buckle up. This is going to be a doozy, because I was like sobbing by this point. And again, I know I hate to even say that, because I know that is not the point. The point is not to feel sorry for her, but this scene just straight up breaks your heart. And to touch on what you said about her father, again, this is another success of the screenwriting, because I think a lesser writer, and I'm curious to see how the book portrays him too, which I absolutely want to read at this point. You know, this type of a character would be a trope of an exhausted parent. The way that this character is so layered with not just that exhaustion, but to see the when you hurt, I hurt because she's such a daddy's girl, clearly, that just adds a whole nother dimension to the character and to their relationship. And the fact that they're able to pull this off in the first 5 minutes of screenwriting is just, it's unreal. So we finally get Melody to school. And this is the other really brilliant thing about it too, is that these are the everyday struggles that people deal with, that families deal with, that, you know, it's not just the person that has the cerebral palsy, it's everyone that's affected by it, because the simplest thing of getting off to school for the morning, I shouldn't say simple because that's an exhaustive task for almost every parent, is making sure the kid has everything to get on the bus with and that they're set for the day. But something that should seemingly not take so long can take twice as long, 3 times as long, just because of the nature of what you're dealing with. And as they say later on in the film, it comes with the chair.
Right.
So we get more funny voiceover to lighten a heavy situation. She introduces us to her school. We see a nice brick building with plants and bright colors. And she goes, no, not that. The trailer next to it. So we know that this program that she is in is pushed off to the side. And then they sting you one more time when she says that she's had the same teacher for 7 years. I'm like Lisa Simpson. And shout out to Disney for getting your Simpsons property in there.
The hard part about this is when her father drops her off, he sees that she's, you know, nobody puts baby in the corner. Well, somebody put baby in the corner here, right? She's given an audiobook and she's just taken by the window where she stares longingly outside. And the kids that are in this classroom are really ranging from kindergarten up to grade 6. But it's not just kids with CP. It's kids who are deaf. It's kids with autism. It's kids with Down syndrome. It's just the special ed room. It's everybody goes into a trailer, and they can't. The style of education, you can't teach a 5-year-old with Down syndrome the same way you can teach a 12-year-old with CP. It's totally different. But you know, if I have a couple of very little issues with this movie, and I'm going to kind of bring this up a few times. So fancy that. Sean's going to repeat himself on Monoreel. I think the biggest issue that I have is it being 2002. I really don't like the fact that they set this in 2002. I think this movie needed to be set in like 1992 because I remember 2002, I was in high school, and we had special ed kids, not in every one of our classes because they did go to special ed, but we had them in our, you know, lack of better term, regular classroom. And they were there, and they had the right to be there, and they should have been there, and they were trying to learn, and depending on what it is that they had going on, sometimes they could sit through an entire 45-minute class, sometimes they couldn't. You know, everybody's condition was different. But it wasn't like shock and awe that they were there.
Right.
And look, we're from New York originally. It's a very progressive state. This takes place in California. You can't argue that California's not as progressive as the state of New York, folks.
Right.
I'm not saying that they should have just set this in Alabama, because maybe Alabama's progressive. I'm not from there. I've never lived there. I've never traveled there, so I'm not going to say that you're not. But the fact that you took such a progressive state, California being very much so, and being very proud of that, and you make it this, well, we don't know what to do with them. And I know that that sounds like a harsh term to refer to them as them, you know, the students, but that's kind of how they refer to the students in the movie. So the movie seems outdated, being set 23 years ago at the time of this recording.
Well, Okay, I'm gonna put a pin in that. You just threw a lot out there. I'm gonna put a pin in that and circle back to it, because I do want to touch on what you said as the students being referred to as them, and just this scene as a whole, as far as what you're talking about with the age range and the range of the spectrum that are in this trailer classroom. I think it's so important that they did this and they showcased it, because that's the social commentary as well, with how certain states and certain areas are treating special needs kids, because they're not specializing each child's ability. And that's also the point of getting Melody out of this classroom eventually, is because not every school and not every district is going to have the budget to accommodate the individual needs. So I like that they really shed a light on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I have the problem with.
No, I understand that. To touch on 1992, I think they may have been handcuffed by the technology, because here's the thing. You can't set it present day, because now we have so much tech, and the machines are going to be so advanced and probably less expensive to get into the hands of the kids that need them. It's not going to be relatable for present day. I think 1992 may be going back too far with a talk to text program. So I think they were probably working with a very finite amount of time as to when these things could be introduced. And even with the insurance red tape,
which still happens, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. But like Stephen Hawking could afford his machine. So even with the help of insurance at the time, once you do clear through all of that red tape, the amount of people that had access to these, whether the insurance kicked in or not, it was probably still just, unfathomable to be able to afford it.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, they're handcuffed in the cost, but it ended up not costing the family anything. It's just the what? When they get put in the classroom. That was not the reaction in 2002. I was in school in 2002. I've been in public, well, not anymore. I had been in public school since 1992. And when you had a child that was special ed in your classroom, it was never, what are they doing here? So, I mean, maybe I'm very fortunate and I was very sheltered, though I don't think I was. There's just something about the year that I have a problem with, because you want to make middle school kids mean, fine. Middle school kids suck.
They do.
They always have and they always will. It's called hormones. It's the administrators and the teachers that I have a problem with, and we're going to put a pin in that until later.
Well, no, we don't really need to put a pin in that, because that is the setup, really, to get her into the classroom. I feel like they leaned into that more so that it sort of glossed over this shock value that you're talking about, because we see her meet Catherine in the classroom, and she relates to her because she's listening to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret on audiobook. And she realizes then how bright Melody is, because she starts asking her questions about the book. And what I love is that, again, like it's just so creative in the way that they're developing the character, because Melody doesn't have the words that she needs on her touchpad. It's very limited what she has on there.
Yeah, it's words like dog, sister, mom, happy, sad,
and
very
it's
basic
just a
words.
laminate.
Right.
So when she doesn't have what she needs, she looks around the room, because she's so resourceful, because she is so intelligent, and she'll pick out what she needs. And Catherine spots this right away. So then they sort of double down on it, because we get the after school parent meeting with Melody's progress report. And this is where, you really delve into the father's character a little bit more, because he's always standing up for her. And, this isn't just to atone for him being really mean to her that morning, he truly believes in her, because he tells the administration, you know, they go through the report card, a pleasure to have in class, and she, you know, she's exceeding all expectation, or no, that's the key. They say she meets all of our expectations, and Chuck replies with, if she is meeting your expectations, why not raise them? And
Right.
That's what really gets the ball rolling here with this idea to put her in a 6th grade history class. There's a great back and forth where they try to shoot down this idea, and the administration just tells Chuck, it's hard to be objective about your child's limitations. And I was like, oof, that is so harsh. But again, that is the reality of what people deal with in these situations. And then you have Mom, who we've hardly spent any time with at this point. She kind of helicopters into this meeting and derails it. It was, sorry, I'm late, and then here's what I want to talk about. Forget that you're late and they're already in the middle of something. And Chuck, who is clearly submissive when it comes to you, he's not finishing getting what he wanted to have addressed, because you just fly in and you're like, okay, here's what we got. And she's not reading the room at all. And she totally derails this meeting.
Yeah, I think that this is a spot-on caricature for the public school system at large, and for school administrators, especially those with tenure. I think there is, while I think a lot of good has come out of the public school system, and while I don't have a child, I am a taxpayer, so I'm allowed to say this. I think that while there has been a lot of good put into the public school system, I think that there are at times there's equally as much bad that happens. I think that's why you're seeing private school enrollments starting to go up. More so now than ever, I feel. And with Mom, you're right. We've spent hardly any time with her. She seems like the pantsuit mom, very busy, very distracted, because we don't know much about her at this point, other than the fact that she is as dismissive of her own daughter as the administration. Now, this all gets fleshed out later.
Yeah.
When we learn that she was the one that fought to even get a special ed program for her daughter. She is the one that pushed administrators. She is the one that cried all the tears. She is the one that pounded her fists raw by pounding the table for her own daughter. She is the one that is trying to protect her daughter from bullies. I get it. From being dismissed by a teacher that she may look up to. I get it. But the problem is you've spent no time with her, and you've introduced this idea of her being dismissive. You haven't built Mom up enough. You get dismissive Mom with the administrators, which is great for Chuck, but you wait at times almost too long to flesh out Mom's backstory, where you're like, you know what? I don't agree with your tactic, but it's coming from a heartfelt place.
I agree with you on that, but I disagree with you because I actually like that they held it. It really took the second watch and really paying attention to not completely write Mom off as an antagonist. But I think that they were also trying to create a little bit more conflict through her character. And you know, I think that's also the reality of it.
As I said, I don't disagree with how Mom feels, and I don't disagree with Mom's logic. Her logic is completely sound, and I think you're right to an extent that gets fleshed out as you watch the movie the second time, because Mom's going to have a character arc. But you have to imagine, if you're writing these films, if you're directing these films, if you're editing these films, there's a chance somebody's going to watch a movie once. You can't assume people are, especially something with heavy subject matter. How many times do people have Schindler's List on their Rolodex of like movies I watch when I'm bored? Of course not. You have to imagine that something of heavy subject matter is something you're going to watch once. It'll stick with you. This is kind of one of those movies. So while in a way it works, and I agree with that, I think it only works because we watched it twice over the course of 24 hours.
Yeah.
I don't think it works quite as well if you're not going to watch the film in back-to-back settings. Something that does work, Mrs. V. Let's talk about Mrs. V for a minute, okay?
Let's.
Mrs. V is introduced as the nosy neighbor, right? She's introduced as the do too good, won't butt out, very nice to the children, but constantly overstepping. That's how she gets introduced.
There's also an element of she wants to be involved with the family to make herself feel good about helping.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very surface level. But I love that she's introduced in that way, and they go a lot deeper with it.
Yeah, she's a caricature. She's like Mrs. Achmonic from Alf. That's how she comes off.
She's like your stereotypical like jazzercise grandma, like bright blue eyeshadow, big like 80s padded shoulder sweatshirts. And that was the reality of 2002, is that people still wore those, not ironically, not vintage. They just never, there were people of a certain age that just did not stop wearing them.
Listen, we all have shirts from 10 and 15 years ago we still wear. That was one of them back in 2002. However, Mrs. V, in my opinion, becomes a top 10 Disney character of all time.
Wow.
With one line. With one line.
Yep.
Which I'm going to recite, and I don't care if it's PG-13. You can earmuff your kids if you want. At this point, she has seen the paperwork on the kitchen counter. She assumes that Melody's going into a classroom. Melody's wanting to go into a classroom. Mom doesn't want her going in. Dad wants her going in. Mrs. V is overly enthusiastic. Mom's talking over her.
While all of this is going on, though, you're getting a little bit ahead. It's also Halloween. Catherine home delivered this paperwork that Mrs. V found on the counter.
Right.
During Halloween. So dad is dressed as Einstein. Mom's a cat. They're having a very serious conversation. Again, the comedy is peppered in. And we also see Melody, this is the brilliance of it, on the day that she is supposed to feel normal and blend in with everyone else because they made this great rocket for her. Yeah, she's an astronaut, and they built a rocket around the chair. And this is the one day where like she should be able to disappear and feel just like everyone else.
And she does say that.
She gets patronized when she's trick-or-treating by the people handing out candy, like, oh, are you sure you can do it? Are you sure you don't need help? And then when she does it, they pat her on the head like she's a 2-year-old learning to do it. And it's so patronizing. Like, it's just such a brilliant scene. But anyway, that's how we get this paperwork that later sets up your line here.
So Mrs. V sees that Diane doesn't want her in the classroom, but Melody does. And she said, she's telling Melody, you need to figure out a way to advocate for yourself a little bit. And she says to her, this is the line, earmuff your kids if you don't want to hear it. She says, there's going to be people that are going to be taking care of you for the rest of your life. Just because they wipe your ass doesn't mean you have to kiss theirs. I sat here the first time I watched it by myself, as we've established, my jaw hit the floor. I went, that might be one of the best lines I've ever heard in any movie. This woman, who I thought was Achmonic, who I thought was every next door neighbor, who couldn't mind her business in every sitcom that you ever saw on television, has just elevated herself to a level I didn't think was possible.
I was utterly blown away. I remember, like, I flopped back on the couch because of the shock value, and I was like, not because, she said the word ass, But just because I was like, you're so not who I thought you were. Like, I was never expecting that level of depth to come from you.
It's the best character reveal of all time.
Oh my God. It's so incredible. After I picked myself up, I grabbed the remote and I had to go back. I was like, this is just so amazing. Again, the screenwriting is just so wildly brilliant. But she also, I think it's worth noting here, the important thing is that they were trying to shield Melody when Catherine came with the paperwork. So Melody didn't know exactly what was in there until Mrs. V started loudmouthing. So now Melody knows. She's banging on her tray and pointing, I want,
On
which,
her
oh my
pad,
God,
yeah.
Also brilliance. The
Yes.
editing,
Yeah.
using those as
Unbelievable.
transitions between scenes and some of the voiceover to get to further delve into how she's feeling. So incredible. So now she knows the jig is up with her parents, and dad is for, mom is against, and finally mom relents, and she says, when no one pays attention except for the bullies, you clean this up. And again, without knowing, well, she does say a little bit, this is everything that we worked for, it's going to be undone.
Yeah.
But we still don't have the full picture of what she did to get Melody into this program and get her to where she's at. You're just still seeing mom at this point as an by this point, I thought, I was like, okay, she's a full-blown antagonist here. And you just think that she's another obstacle standing in Melody's way, not knowing that this really is coming from a place of love and it is coming from a place of protection. All we've seen so far is that she's working. She's late for the meeting. Dad is the one attending to Melody. It seems like 80 or 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So it really does almost villainize her to make such a statement like that. You clean up the mess if she gets emotional about it, because it really does make her seem hands off.
And I'll do you one better.
Situation.
I'll do you one better. When Melody doesn't want to go to school until the permission slip is signed, Mom, Diane, puts food in front of Melody, and I couldn't tell if it was Melody flipping with her wrist, brushing the food away or not, but Mom puts the bowl of cereal in front of her and literally pulls it away and intentionally puts it out of her own daughter's reach. And you know that your daughter can't reach for it. And she goes, oh, I guess we're on a hunger strike now. And I went,
yeah.
Did you just do that out of spite?
Yeah.
Are you literally not serving breakfast to your daughter who has this condition because she would have the gall to want to be in a classroom and learn? In two sittings watching this, I can't tell if it's Melody flipping her wrist as in I'm not hungry and Diane being testy about it, or if Diane puts the food in front of her and then punishes her by putting it out of reach. I can't tell. And I think that that's a little bit of a miss. Like, I feel like we needed a second to breathe, because if that's Mom doing that just to be mean, Mom's the most evil person on earth.
Right.
If it's that Melody doesn't want it and Mom's fed up, we need to know that. And it's too much of a question mark, because it is on the surface such a cruel thing to do that you can't leave it to question.
And that's also juxtaposed against Melody doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to get out of bed. So what does Dad do? He gets in bed with her and he says, okay, 5 more minutes. And then uses reverse psychology by snoring until she's had enough. And then she gets out. She wants to get out of bed.
It makes her laugh. And
yeah,
it does a good job of building their relationship a little further too.
But it also sets up the idea of Dad's on her side and Mom is not, because again, with this confusing breakfast scene, either way, it just villainizes the mom. So we finally get Melody into history class. And this is so tactfully uncomfortable to watch. Meaning, we as the audience are supposed to feel uncomfortable with this whole situation, because the kids in the classroom and the teacher are doing nothing to facilitate it. So you have Catherine bringing her in, and that's part of the deal. Catherine brings 2 of the students from special ed into history class, but she has to be with them the whole time. That was part of her agreement. And she is just forging ahead. This is great. If you could just move your desk so that we can fit her chair through. And the whole time, Mr. Dimwit, that's what I'm calling him, is watching this go down, and he's clearly not happy with this situation at all. Like, he says, okay, welcome, but it's half-hearted. You know, he doesn't really mean it. He's just standing watching this happen instead of, you know, Melody, why don't you sit here? Why don't you go over here where you can see? Or you know, instead he does say, take the empty desk. Someone's absent today. And again, great screenwriting, because you know everything you need to know about this character and how he feels about the situation. He's basically saying, we'll make this work for today. And you got lucky because today this works out. But he's doing nothing to actually help them get acclimated. And then, you know, they just double down on the discomfort when no one gives Melody a chance. You know, they come in the middle of a pop quiz. So Melody knows one of the answers, and, you know, she uses her resources. She doesn't have the answer in front of her, so she points to something in the classroom. She gets it right. And it was actually a smart question, because they asked who discovered America, and everybody thinks it's Columbus.
European, right?
Yeah, and the first European, you're right. And the answer is Leif Erikson, and there's a leaf on the wall, and she points to it. And then what the bratty, Claire. I can't stand Claire. She's like, well, Mr. D shouldn't really say anything. The implication being that the aide gave the answer for her, which was not the case at all. Everybody saw you point to the leaf, and if you knew the correct answer, you would know that she was right. So then they ask a follow-up question, where is he from? So she spells out Iceland. And Catherine is saying the letters as she's pointing to it. So Mr. D can clearly hear. She spells out the full word, and before Catherine can confirm that she got it, he's like, Iceland. He's from Iceland. So Melody doesn't really get to answer, even though she knows it. And again, just so frustrating on her behalf. So I don't want to sound repetitive, but I'm pulling a shot. It's just such brilliant writing, so that we as the audience are sitting there screaming right along with her. And to, again, this is where they're going for empathy, not sympathy. And even though if you don't have cerebral palsy, you really can't empathize, it's as close as we're going to get to be able to feel the way that she feels.
Well, and it subverts your expectations.
Yes.
Because if I remember correctly, they establish him, because I think they show a plaque or a painting or a picture on the wall where he is like an award-winning teacher. And he's giving this, why do we study the past? To prepare for the future. He's got all of his kids in his class are like fully invested in his message. You think he's going to be Mr. Feeney. He's Dead Poets Society, because in all of these kinds of films, it's always the one teacher that puts all of their effort into the kid, and they rally for the child, and they're the ones that... No, that's not what happens. Now, what he does later is unforgivably horrific.
Yeah.
But, in a way, you almost can't be that mad with him, because it shows how ill-equipped the public school system and their teachers were to take on special ed kids. Which is the problem with setting this in 2002, because by then most of them were ready. This is the common thread of, had they made this earlier, he would have been a sympathetic character. Not necessarily for screwing the kid out of her spot on the team, but for not knowing what to do. for not having been educated himself on how to do this. 'Cause special ed teachers, that it's a totally different thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, and to this day, it is very much a different thing. And that's where it is a specialty. It is different than your typical English teacher or history teacher or arithmetic or algebra, whatever it may be. That's why teachers' aides are so valuable in these school districts. So you could have made him a person that was just ill-equipped, that was scared, that just didn't know any better. Instead, you just made him mean and condescending, as if he couldn't wait to not be a part of it anymore.
Yes.
And at no point, I'm getting this out of the way, at no point does this man have a character arc. He apologizes later.
He doesn't
after,
do anything to redeem himself.
Correct. After she puts him in his place and he allows her to stay in the classroom, you see him like crack a smile like, yeah, she belongs here. It's not enough. And you needed to do something here. And I just wish this movie had not been set in 2002.
Well, to your point, Catherine is that champion teacher. She's the Feeney. She's the Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams character. She's the one, that's totally in Melody's corner, despite what that means for her. I want to circle around because I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think this is a good time to bring it up. You mentioned that Mr. D's not trained in this situation, and he says as much later on.
Yeah.
I wish that had come from another character trying to defend him, because that could have redeemed him a little bit. Instead, because he says it, it's just a cop-out answer. Because he doesn't want to deal with it. He could, even if you're not completely trained, he could have done so much more to acclimate her and so much more to discipline the kids and the way that they're treating her, and he doesn't. He's an overgrown child himself in that regard.
And in a way, they could have just as easily, after that first classroom session, they could have had him and Catherine bickering in the hallway away from the kids. You didn't let her answer the question. Well, I don't know how to handle it. Like, he could have said it earlier on, and it would have at least redeemed it a little bit. By the time it comes and goes, it's like,
cop-out.
I don't think it's a cop-out. I think it's just a misplaced line. I think what he's saying is accurate. I think what he's saying is true to what the public school system was when these programs were first getting introduced. I think it comes off as a cop-out, but I don't think that it is. I think it just comes too late. No,
because he's saying it to save his own skin in that scene. We'll pin that till we get there. But yeah, I mean, that scene, it's just so hard to watch, because with a little bit more patience, everybody could have, made Melody and her classmate feel more welcome. So we do get this beat where Mom is giving Melody a bath. And this is where Mom sort of gets redeemed a little bit, because she's having a lot of fun. She doesn't care that Melody's splashing her. And even, again, really clever voiceover. Melody wants to be able to take a bath by herself one day, and she's like, but Mom really enjoys this, so I throw her a bone. Very cute. In the interim, she met Rose in class. She compliments her shoes, and Diane tells Melody about, while she's in the bath, an exhibit at the museum that she might like to see, and Melody asks if she could bring a friend, so she picks Rose. I love how complex they wrote this character, because Rose is trying to do the right thing and give Melody the time of day, but she's still clearly uncomfortable. So it sort of seems disingenuous, because it doesn't seem like she's trying all that hard until much later on. And then everything is made so much worse, because Rose runs into their other classmates and she goes to say hi. And it's innocent enough. I don't think that she totally ditched Melody for the day, but it was wrong place at the wrong time. And then Chuck comes in and says something to her about it, and it just makes the whole thing so hard. Like that, again, relatable, because it's that teenage embarrassment. This is like when your parents embarrassed you in front of your friend. That is something that everybody can identify with. It's mortifying. You want to curl in a ball and die.
Yeah, and I think that to an extent, it's like, hey, she's 12, give her a break. I think that at the onset, it is what you said, where it seems like she's kind of just doing it to be polite. But what I do like is before she runs off to go say hello to her friends, she actually does start, like, talking to Melody like she is your average 12-year-old. She's like, oh, my parents don't ever let me do anything. It's this class and this class and this club and this club. She's venting. She's venting a way that a child with helicopter parents would vent. So it's one of the first times that Melody has a colleague, for a lack of better term.
A peer.
That can, yes, that is treating her as an equal.
Yes.
And so I love that happens. And she is just 12, and she does run off to say hi to her friends, and to her it's not a big deal because, well, my friends are standing there. I'm just going to go say hi, how are you? And then you're right, Dad sort of makes it this really awkward thing, but what it does is it puts Melody in a position where she rushes off. She doesn't want to be there because she's upset, she's embarrassed, and she goes and watches a film with Stephen Hawking. And her father goes and scolds her, you can't just run off like that. And he says, oh, Stephen Hawking is a lot like you, right? And she points no and talk on her little contact touchpad. And that's when he gets the idea, like, okay, we've got to get her the Medi-Talker. I love that this is how they introduced the idea.
Agreed. And we get more brilliant writing here because it's not just all of the conflicts that they're going to have to go through with insurance. We also get more conflict between mom and dad because, again, one is for and one... Well, not that mom is against this one. We see dad do what he does, and Chuck dives into action the next day. He's on the phone trying to figure out what needs to be done to make this happen. And they find out that Melody would need to be assessed to get the Medi-Talker. And he finds out that it's going to cost $17,000 and insurance isn't going to cover it. And Diane says, well, you know what you're supposed to do? You need to send in the big guns. And I went, good Lord, she does not have faith in anyone. And again, we've not had the full picture with Diane yet. We don't have all of the information about what she's done to this point. All we've seen is Chuck be Melody's champion and spring to action and make things happen for her. And Diane is coming off as, you know, again, late to the meeting, you're working, you're in and out, you're not really proactive about much when it comes to Melody. And now you don't even think that he can handle this?
That's how it comes off, but that's not how it's meant.
It's not. She does take charge of the situation, though. She goes down to the office and she finds out that there is a chance to get it covered if they have her assessed again, which they don't want to do because it's like you can only imagine how many times have they been through this.
Right, and they sort of say as much. But, you know, this is another example of, like, finally, this is the Diane we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
But the problem is, we don't know about what Diane is. We don't know who she is yet. We find out later all of the things that she did, all the fighting she did, all the ways she advocated for her kid, all the uphill battles that she fought. We needed to know a lot more about her early on because it comes off the way that you described, although that's not how it's meant to be at all. One of the most accurate things, though, is the freaking insurance doctors.
Ugh.
Oh my God. My mother worked in healthcare for nearly 40 years, and she would tell me stories about all of the ways that these insurance companies would go out of their way to deny claims, to deny coverage, to get out of paying for anything. You and I have gone through it. There was a time once my mother working in healthcare, I had a medical bill for like $1,000 and she was like, don't pay it. Let it go to collections and then don't pay that either because eventually it'll just go away. She was like, this is what insurance companies do. It's just incredible to me. And of course I didn't, and it went away. Like, it's incredible to me. These insurance companies, for all the money you pay, for all the money they make, they just find ways. Insurance is at times a scam because it's like, give us money for nothing. Like, this is a prime example of give us money for nothing. And it just breaks your heart because it's not just Melody that you're watching this happen to. You know how this is also affecting her parents because you can tell at this point how much it hurts them that this poor 12-year-old has never had a voice before and they just want her to have. It's not even that they want to hear her speak. That's the thing. It's not that they want to hear her speak. They want her to have a voice. It's so incredible.
Yeah, it's exactly it. I think it's also worth noting, though, that as far as letting insurance bills go to collections, this is not a do as I say, not as I do. We are not advocating this.
It was my form of revenge, and we got away with it. I had heard about
not saying that's going to happen for everybody, and not saying that you should do it.
But I heard about this from somebody who worked with billing departments and worked in healthcare. But you are like way overreading what I'm saying. This is just what they do.
I just don't want anybody coming for us. I don't want emails. Well, Jackie and Sean said it was fine. No, we didn't. Anyway.
I'm still not getting my money.
Let's talk about more BS in the insurance process. This test. This is another brilliant scene, brilliant voiceover, and so relatable because I am a terrible test taker. I got very, very lucky that I was one of those people who was able to retain a lot of information and ace my tests without having to crack a book and study really, really hard.
Get out of this room.
No, I got very lucky because like that was the thing. I was an average student. I could have gone, for all of the advanced classes and like gone for the A+, but I was like, I'm not willing to put more time. I spend all day at school. I don't want to spend another 7 hours. And that's not to say that I was a poor student. I was a great student. I just got very lucky in that I didn't have to work as hard for it. But with all that being said, I was still a terrible test taker because I fell for every trick in the book as far as overanalyzing something and then picking the wrong answer, which is exactly what happens here. They give Melody one of these things is not like the other tests, but it is a tomato, strawberries, cherries, a red balloon, and a banana. The obvious choice would be the banana because it's yellow and the rest of the items are red. But I would have done the same thing. Melody picked the balloon because she can't eat it and thought that was the more intelligent answer. Why? Because it is. That's exactly what I would do. This was every pitfall of taking every test that I've ever done. And then she realizes, and the voiceover says it, she's like, I know what the right answer is. I have to know what you think the right answer is. And that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah, well, that's where the standard tests are just a joke.
Nonsense.
Because they are programmed so that no matter what your answer is, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Because you pick the banana, well, the others are red, and this is yellow. Yeah, but that's fruit, and that's a balloon. Okay, so I'll pick the balloon. But they're all red. Why didn't you pick the yellow banana? It's made so that you fail the answer right away. So just so that we're clear, I'm saying don't pay your medical bills. Jackie's saying don't spend too much time studying. You tell us who's going to serve you better in the long run. I'm just going to leave that there. But you're right. It is such a joke, and it's frustrating. And as she's going through it, and she says that the answer is balloon, you know the answer is balloon. but you know they're going to tell her it's the wrong answer because it's manipulated.
Yeah.
That's what these insurance companies do. It's what a lot of... I'm getting off of this because otherwise we're going to lose people. That's it. I'm not saying anymore. I got to get off of this.
Well,
I'm just going to get angry.
Where it does really work, just from a screenwriting perspective, take the reality out of it. You knock her down again so that we can give a chance to Catherine to build her back up because, Chuck is exhausting every possible option and he brings it to her and he's like, is there anything else to be done? And she was like, well, look right here. Here's the loophole. It says you need a doctor's assessment. Doesn't say what kind of doctor. I have a PhD. And then she autographs it and they get their Medi-Talker. So of course, Mrs. V is there for the grand unveiling.
Well, Mrs. V was there to sign off for the package.
Yes, because she accepted it, and that's fraud.
Yes.
Which is really fun. It's the funniest line Diane delivers throughout the entire thing because it's so subtle, but it's great. We finally get Melody her voice, though. She's wanted this for so long. Let her have her moment and set it up. The sister's trying to push buttons. Everybody's all up in her business. It's a little bit of a chaotic scene, but then, oh God, where it all comes crashing down the second time I cried is that Chuck comes home. She's set up. And again, where this film subverts your expectations, you think that she's going to say, hi, daddy, and that's going to trigger the waterworks. The first thing that she chooses to say is that Ollie jumped because she's just been holding this in the entire time and she finally gets to tell somebody what happened. And oh my God, it brings Chuck to his knees. It brought me to my knees. I was just done. Oh my God.
But I love the fact that her first words are in self-defense.
Yes.
That's the whole character.
And that's the whole point, is how frustrating it is to not be able to express herself the way that she needs to in the moment. And that's going to bite them all later on.
Right, because now she goes to school. She's got the Medi-Talker. She's using it in class. Mr. D gets on her for answering without being called on in class.
Such a jerk. Such a jerk. But I love that this is not enough for Melody. She got what she wanted. She got her Medi-Talker. She has a voice, and she still wants to reach higher and push the boundaries even more of what she can do.
And this is where Catherine's great, because Catherine is going through all of the phrases that they have programmed in the Medi-Talker. And she's like, these are all basic. She's like, can't you do any better? And I love that for not only Catherine, but also for Melody. It's like, no, this is the first time you have your own voice. Let your personality stand behind it. And she gives her parents some obnoxious words and phrases. And, you know, Chuck is like, do we really want to put this? And Diane's like, it's her voice. Let her say what she wants. So, you know, you're doing a good job now of building Diane back up. Mm-hmm. But I love this moment for the family. I love it for Melody. You know, just in general, I think the whole thing is spectacular. I also love the fact that now she's hoping that she can connect a little more with Rose, because now she can actually talk to Rose.
Right.
Communicating with the Medi-Talker, and Rose at this point is not totally still on board, right? She's still being a little coy. Like, you know that she knows what the right thing to do is, and you can tell that she actually does like Melody, but there's that, you know, Claire, she sucks. So Claire's kind of, you know, doing what she can to pick on Melody and sort of give it to Rose a little bit. So Rose, being an average 12-year-old girl, is giving in to peer pressure. Guess what? Everybody did it at the age of 12 because you're trying to be cool. And I love this moment where the pre-programmed trivia game on the Medi-Talker is what Melody uses to explain to Rose, hey, I can help you study for WizKids. We can play my game.
Right.
I think the whole thing is really well done.
And again, great screenwriting because it's more conflict. Melody is starting to fit in. They're going to have a study session. Now, instead of Rose going out with Melody and her family, Melody gets invited to somebody. This is probably the first time she's ever been invited anywhere.
Other than Mrs. V's house.
Exactly. So she goes over to Rose's, and we're thinking, okay, great, we have a sense of normalcy. And then Rose's mom has to be all OCD. Oh, I need to put a box down the carpet because she's afraid the tires in her wheelchair are going to ruin her precious carpet. But it's that same parallel to getting her situated in Mr. D's classroom. She's ready to just do something seemingly simple, and it's dragged out because it's like, okay, wait, I'm going to put one piece of cardboard down. Now wheel forward. I'm going to put a second piece of cardboard down. Now wheel forward. And if it sounds painful listening to me say it, you can't even imagine how uncomfortable it is to watch.
Patronizing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So finally, we get to see Melody be a 12-year-old girl because they start studying, and then it immediately leads to a conversation about a boy. And Melody has a crush, and Rose is like, "Ooh, you like him." And, Melody doesn't want to admit it, but she does. And then we get, you get this really sweet scene between the two of them where they're just acting the way that preteens do, and they're all giggly. But then we get that cold splash of water with Melody's reality because Rose offhand says, "You want to kiss it?" She's just teasing.
Yeah.
But Melody tells her, "I'm never going to kiss this boy." And what I love is Rose starts to say, "That's not true," catches herself because she realizes that that's kind of unkind. And she says to Melody, "You don't know that." And that's where you see that Rose is really starting to try with her because she's not going to patronize her and tell her something that may actually not be true.
Right. So you get the montage of them studying for Whiz Kids, and now comes time for the Whiz Kids tryout, and Melody finds her way to the classroom. She's bumping the door with her wheelchair because she wants to be let in. Mr. D lets her in, and she explains that she's there to try out. And, he says to her, you realize that this is not a club. This is a competitive team, because he still doesn't understand what her condition is. And she says, "I'm not fragile."
I love that line. Not, "I'm not scared. I'm not fragile."
But he kind of like smirks and smiles.
Yeah.
So now I'm waiting for this, okay, Mr. D's about to get on board. Here comes the great teacher. And of course, that doesn't happen.
But again, really good at subverting expectations because you never see it coming what he does. Twice what he does.
So let's put a pin in that, because what happens prior to that is this continued build of the relationship with Rose and Melody, because they're talking after the Whiz Kids about some of the answers on the exam, and Claire is, Claire sucks.
Running her mouth.
So she sort of puts her down and drags everybody away, and Rose inadvertently, because she's trying to explain to Claire what's going on, and she says, "Oh, well, Melody suffers from CP," and Melody has to correct her and say, "I'm not suffering." And she, goes into the pre-programmed, "I have this is what it does, here's why." And Rose does feel bad for what she said, because she didn't mean to hurt her feelings. You know what she was? She was a 12-year-old that misspoke. So it's incredibly relatable, and it doesn't villainize Rose. That's why the writing is so good. You know what she said is hurtful, but she didn't mean it, and she doesn't understand right away. So what does she do? The minute that she sees it, she goes, "Hey, do you want to go to the mall this weekend?" And it's like, you know what? Here we go. She invites her to the mall. It's an extension of the olive branch. And then you get the mall scene where they're causing mischief. They get into the store, and they're online. This trendy store is opening. There's a DJ. They're only letting in a certain amount of people. There's a security guard. They're going to wait online. It's going to take forever. And Melody comes up with the idea of, let's use my condition as an excuse to get in. And they're giggling as the security guard gets pressured into letting them in. Like, the scene is so great because it doesn't only build their friendship, but you are so happy to see that Melody is just being a preteen at the mall.
Yes. That had to come from Melody, though, because had Rose asked her to do that, then it would have seemed like she was using her. And again, brilliant screenwriting. It's not just a great montage to show their friendship progressing. It's not just a great montage that's a time capsule of that period when malls were still a thing. You're also building up this friendship that is about to come crashing down because they do the Whiz Kids test and Melody feels confident about it. She didn't have to guess at anything. And then they announce who actually makes the team. And it's 4 people and 2 alternates, and Melody is not one of them. Rose is barely one of them because she's the first one announced. She had the lowest score.
Of the kids that make the starting roster.
Yes, of the kids that are on the Whiz Kids. So Melody thinks that it's kind of weird that they said Connor, the boy that she has a crush on, had the high score.
New school record.
Yes. And she was like, again, this is where it's really important. It's not just about having the ability to speak. It's about finding your voice. So she's upset and she tells her parents about it and they're ready to spring into action. But now she's saying, no, don't do that because it's going to hurt Rose. She knows she has the highest score. She will make the team and the person with the lowest is going to get bumped into the alternate spot. So now this is where she's being thoughtful about when she does want to use her voice, but her parents are still ignoring her because they present this to the school and ultimately get Rose kicked off the team. And this is the scene where Mr. D says that he's not equipped because he wasn't trained to deal with this. This is where I really feel it's a cop-out because they rightfully accuse him of not grading her tests and he admits to everything. Now, granted, it's kind of like 2 wrongs don't make a right because Catherine is the one who went and got Melody's test out of his desk and held it against the answer sheet and realized that she had 100. She had every single thing right. And then that's the other accusation that's made is that they try to ask Melody very leading questions about, was your aide hovering over the right answer? And did you just say that's what it was? Because they don't want to believe that she actually scored the highest and is this capable. I feel like if this was a real life situation, Catherine probably would have gotten fired and Mr. D probably would have gotten canceled too.
I think Mr. D, I think what would have likely happened is, yes, I think Mr. D, he probably has tenure, so he's protected, but I think he would have been removed as the coach of the Whiz Kids because Catherine is not a teacher, because she's launching a program into the school district as a part of her, postdoctorate study. Yes, I think she would have been banned, but I think that the administrators would have allowed Melody to join the team without much fuss and aggravation and argument. Instead, what happens is that Dimmings admits to what he's done, and the whole time you're thinking the administrators are going to drop the hammer on him because they look at him, they're like, there must be a good reason why he did this, right? Right? And he's like, well, I just don't know what to do. I wasn't equipped for this, and I didn't think that you didn't tell me, and it's so horrible and it's so lame. And what does the administrator do? There's no ramifications for Dimmings. They ban Catherine from the classroom for tarnishing his reputation. Now, he did that well enough on his own, but that wasn't even enough. You know why they really banned her? Because they said, you're going to prove that more special ed kids should be in our classrooms, and this is going to cost us money.
Yep.
I went, well, there's the public school system. There it is. There it is in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen.
But that was also where I was just astounded, as if I couldn't love this movie more. They held up the mirror and called it out. I was not expecting that. I mean, the film is already so layered and so nuanced. I didn't think that they were going to be able to get to a deeper level, and they manage to do it. It's just unbelievable.
And they continue to do it time and time again, because when they get to Whiz Kids, Melody tries to apologize to Rose for what has happened. And she tries to explain herself, and Rose says to her, as a catty 12-year-old girl would say, I was only friends with you because my parents promised me an iPod if I hung out with you. And you know that she's not telling the truth.
Yeah.
You know she's saying it just to be hurtful.
Yeah. And that's why that mall scene is so important, because she did that all by herself.
Yeah, so you know that she's lying.
Yeah.
You know that there was never any disingenuous interaction with them. She never used Melody. But it's relatable because guess what? I don't care how nice of a kid you were. You went out of your way and lied to hurt somebody. We all did it. We all said something we didn't mean just to upset somebody, because when you're 12, you don't know how to talk to people. This is why middle school sucks.
No, and she cut deep and she knew it. I love this Whiz Kids set. I think it's so cute. I think it's, it feels very sort of Carmen Sandiego-ish, like a public broadcasting show.
Do you remember the Long Island Challenge on News 12?
No.
How do you not remember this?
I don't know that I've ever even heard of it.
It was a trivia. It was basically Whiz Kids for high school kids. And they would put two high schools against each other.
Well, I didn't study. Why would I know things?
So this is true. I watched it, and I was in the studio audience because twice my high school ended up advancing. I was not a contestant. Otherwise, I would have told them, don't pay your insurance bills. But twice I attended. This was a thing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yep.
I would have loved to do it just because hello TV studio, but that's the thing. Hop Hog never really got acknowledged with stuff like that because we were. Why are you looking at me funny?
I have a story that I'm not going to tell on air about your legal eagles.
Well, no, I was going to. We got overlooked for so much because we were never really a town. We got a zip code because the other two districts were too large, so they had to put more schools in, and that's why they gave us a zip code. We're like not really a town.
You had Letterman jackets for your debate team. Stop it. And your mock law team, who I hated. They were a rival of ours.
Oh, why? Because they argued and they won against you?
No, we beat them. We beat them. But you know what it is? They're actually, you know who they were? They're the prep school kids that are in this movie that Spaulding goes up against, where they all have the matching outfits and not just like the t-shirts that your parents like iron pressed on. Like everything was a prim and proper uniform. They thought they were smarter than they were, but they actually weren't. And they did lose, but they still carried themselves with that like air of arrogance.
That sounds about right.
So that was my thing. But anyway, that's a Long Island thing. And if you're not from either one of those schools, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about. But it worked to be so relatable. I'd have to imagine that a lot of schools had that public access local television show that did some sort of school trivia. Like, I don't know, maybe I am just one of the most fortunate people on earth, where we accepted everybody in our classrooms and we went on public access cable and had trivia shows. Maybe this movie was made for me. I don't know. But I just think that this made it very much relatable, more so than it already was.
No, it's a great scene. It's a great set. Is it a little predictable that it comes down to a tie and Melody becomes the tiebreaker?
It is
little
until it's not.
Bit, yes. But it's worth putting Claire in her place because Melody's other teammate, they have to decide amongst themselves who's going to sudden death to break the tie.
Right.
And Claire doesn't want to send her because, again, she's got to take the dig and she's going to say, well, how is it going to look if we're sending Melody? And Connor and Rodney are like, she scored the highest. We have to decide. And Claire's like, how is this going to look if we send her up there? We're running out of time. We need to decide. And Connor and Rodney say, well, then it's Melody. Because they already know she got the highest score. they're not really even confident enough in themselves to do it at this point. So they know it's already 2 against 1 when they're fighting Claire on this. So it's great that Melody gets to, stick it to every single person, especially Claire. But here's where, of all the incredibly brilliant things that they do in this film, I think this was perhaps the smartest one. The movie doesn't end here with a big celebration of Melody proving herself. There's still so much conflict that happens following that. Honestly, this is like the end of Act 2.
Yeah.
There's still an entire third act that just elevates and layers this movie so much more that they don't just end it with Melody pulling out the W. Because now the award for winning, they advance to nationals in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Which obviously is going to present Melody with a whole other set of challenges getting on the plane and getting her there. But she's so excited for this trip.
I think that the breakfast seed is planted when they go out to a restaurant. Everybody's eating pizza and Melody's eating spaghetti and she's kind of making a mess of herself. And Claire starts to giggle and whisper to a girl next to her. So a seed is being planted. The storm that pushes the flight, that cancels the initial flight and pushes them onto an earlier one, that's just an unfortunate circumstance. Like Claire can't determine the weather, but you can see early on that she's still trying to find ways to exclude Melody in spite of the fact that it's this wonderful victory. And right, you're thinking it's going to be bottom, and Mr. D is going to be sitting there nodding going, she did it. It's going to be one of these great, and it's not. You're 100% right. It could have ended on that, and it would have just been cheesy, and you would have loved it for how it ended, but here comes the roller coaster. So there's no way for her to know that the flight is going to get canceled, but you can see that the wheels are already in motion.
Mr. D never even congratulates her.
Nope.
By the way.
He just nods
Doesn't
and smiles.
celebrate with her on stage. He makes a toast to the team at dinner, but does not acknowledge what she did for them and that she scored the highest, which is ultimately what led them to a victory.
Right.
And I also love that they show her eating in that scene, not just for the reality of it, but I think that had they had her mom feeding her, it would have given more cause for points and snickers. But at the same time, I think that's one of the things that also speaks to the relatability of it, of, her being 12 years old and mom, don't embarrass me. This was the less embarrassing option for her, which is ultimately why, as you've been building up, Melody doesn't get the invite to breakfast, which is where they all find out that their flight was canceled and they need an earlier plane. And had Melody been at breakfast, she would have found out at the same time as the rest of the team.
And she would have been on the flight. Instead, the Brooks family are the last to find out, and Melody's not even at home when the call comes. She's next door with Mrs. V.
Who's bedazzling her shoes because she loves bedazzled shoes.
And says, we're going to make these sparkle on television for you.
And Melody needs special shoes. That's why, she loves Rose's shoes. That's why they're such a big deal to her, because she can't, nothing that she needs is available in a design like that.
Right. And there's a scene earlier where they are shopping for shoes, but she's in orthotics. And they say, we got them in black. That's the only color we have for her pronation. She can't. We don't have pink or purple or blue. We have one kind of shoe. That's what she gets. So I think a lot of people, they assume that she's going to make the flight. They're going to push their way through. It's going to be a nail biter, and she's just going to make it. And she doesn't. She doesn't make it.
The elevator's broken. They have to take her up the ramp where cars are coming out of the parking garage. It is another tough scene to watch, and it's heartbreaking. when she doesn't make the flight.
No, and but I'll tell you, this whole thing is really smart.
Yeah, they build her up, they knock her down.
Well, not just that. I'm talking about the logistics of it. They could have very easily Disney-fied this, and they're begging the airline, please make an exception. Open the door. Now, of course, you lose her wonderful speech at the end where she shoves it up the you-know-what of her classmates and Mr. Deming, but Disney could have given her the happy ending, and they don't. Instead, what the airline attendant says is, the doors are shut. This will violate FAA regulations, and the parents start arguing with the person who works for the airline. Mind you, this movie's set in 2002, so you are a year removed from 9/11. And
great point.
If people don't remember or have no reference to what airline travel was before the tragedy that was September 11th, 2001, I'll put it for you on these terms. My uncle used to travel internationally for business. He used to go to London every couple of months. At one point, he was actually supposed to move there temporarily. And he would tell me, years later, he was like, I would pull up to Kennedy or LaGuardia 20 minutes before my doors were closing to go to London, and I'd be in the plane within 10 minutes. That's how lax airport security was. So in 2002, it was like, we got to rush, but we'll make it. We've got to rush. They shut the doors. Well, they'll reopen them.
No, they won't.
They won't. That a lot of things changed after that, and there were no exceptions. So I love the fact that Disney kind of stuck with that. I love that I'm assuming, and I'm sure we'll find out in time, I'm assuming they stayed true to the source material, to the novel, because it doesn't necessarily give you the happy ending that you think you're going to get. You assume she's going to go to nationals, she's going to perform there, she's going to win, she's going to bring all this awareness, the school's going to get all this funding, they're going to include more special ed. All of that is out the window because, to your point, they keep subverting your expectations over and over and over again.
Even with something as seemingly insignificant as the milkshake, her mom makes her one to try and lift her spirits, and Melody purposely knocks it over onto her Meditalker. And, you think it's just this scene of her acting out. And, rightfully, she's frustrated. Of course, there's even another, oh my God, it's another great line where she's talking to Catherine and she makes the joke. And Catherine's like, how do you deal with this all the time? I'd punch a wall. And she responds, I'd probably miss. It's, oh God, it's so funny and so sad at the same time. But point being, this is how Melody can express her anger, by knocking over this milkshake. And you think it's just that, and you think it's just to show us that she's venting, but it's actually a huge catalyst setting up this accident with her sister, because now she's eliminated her means of communication, and her parents have regressed to, we're in the heat of the moment and we can't listen to you right now. We can't take the time to hear you right now. And it costs them big time. I was flabbergasted. I could not believe that they went there, but they went for it. Bambi's got nothing on this movie.
I got to be honest with you. There was a moment where I thought this was Gage from Pet Sematary. Not that they were going to put her in the Micmac burial ground and bring her back.
No, but I thought we were going to pay a big price for not listening.
Well, because they cut away and I think it fades to black. No, it just cuts to black. Mom is like the blood curdling scream, and you hear Penny screaming, and the next thing you know, it's like a slow fade into a sky with trees. And I'm like, my God, they're in a cemetery. Like that's how you're thinking, like we're at a burial right now.
Yeah.
And you're thinking it's going to slowly pan down. But instead, thankfully, nothing, Penny was just scraped, bumps and bruises. But immediately Melody's concern is did her brain get affected? Because God. She doesn't want her to have a brain injury.
My only, and just minutia critique here, because this works better for the script than I think it does as far as grounding this moment in reality. This is Diane's character arc, where it was, I gave you your voice and I didn't listen to you and I shouldn't have done that. And she is so busy consoling Melody in this moment. And she should, because Melody's first thought, to your point, is her brain okay? Melody is completely traumatized and obviously very frustrated. Again, nobody listened to me. And she was doing it. It's like a parallel to Ollie. I was screaming because somebody's life is in danger and you're not listening to me. So Diane is so busy consoling her, we don't really get to see the reality of a grief-stricken mother who just hit her child with a car. Even though we know that Penny is okay, even though, and this is where I wish we would have like actually explicitly been told what Diane does for a living, because we've seen her in Scrubs, but like, are you a dentist? Are you a nurse? Do you know that she's okay? Are you being pragmatic with her being okay? And is that why you can have this conversation with Melody? Because...
And I thought she just worked at the university. They don't ever say what she does.
If she's not in the medical field where she can like objectively deem her child okay, she needs to be like distraught right now. And she's not. She's more upset over... I didn't listen to you, and she's humbled. And yes, you should be in this moment, but you should also be feeling a lot of other emotions and like not thinking clearly. And I think Chuck is like next to the stretcher.
Yeah, I think.
But like we completely gloss over what this means.
Kid with a car.
Yeah, and his reaction to it.
And the thing is, like, I think that this is a really important moment that Diane has with Melody. But it could have taken place later that evening. It could have taken place in the hall of the emergency room.
Yeah.
Like, you just minutes ago ran over your child, or at least hit your child with your car, and now you're smiling and laughing. It doesn't seem like enough time has passed where that's an appropriate thing to do.
Yes.
I would agree with that. Ultimately, what it does is it sets up this moment where Melody goes back to Mr. Dimming's class. We learn that they obviously went to nationals. No, they did not win.
Because they didn't have her.
Because they didn't have Melody. And Melody tells them all off, to keep it brief. Not just her classmates, but also Dimming. And she declares that she doesn't care that the program's over. She's staying in class. And she's able to do this in front of her classmates, in front of her teacher, in front of her parents. And her parents leave, and they leave her in the classroom, which is the right thing to do. And Mr. Dimmings doesn't fight her on it, and he allows her to remain in class because he hasn't done enough horrible things. So what else is he going to do? He's not going to kick her out. It's a wonderful moment for Melody, and I thought that it was the right and appropriate way to end the film.
I couldn't agree more, because the whole thing is, yes, you've gotten the ability to speak, but how do you use your voice now? And I don't normally do this because you and I, we do our research as far as the making of films and box office numbers and things like that. But I never, ever read reviews because I don't want anything to influence what I'm going to say. But I was sort of deep diving into the Sundance of it all, and I got curious because I was like, how was Jennifer Aniston not like publicizing this more? I understand maybe she doesn't want to overshadow, everyone else in this movie because of her notoriety, but at the same time, why didn't you use your platform to bring awareness to it? And spread the word a little bit more. So I was interested to find out a little bit more about that. And what I ended up doing was reading Variety's review of this film. And they praised Disney for it. And, they said it's near perfect, and rightfully so. But they said what stops it from being perfect is that Melody doesn't have a character arc because she does exactly what she's going to do and breaks barriers. And I went, did you even watch this movie? This is the arc right here. It's what she chose to do with her voice once she finally got it. She didn't have to go rock the boat again. She didn't have to go back to the classroom and confront everyone, but she did. What's more of a full arc than that, Variety? Are you kidding? Do better.
Sometimes you give people the rope and they hang themselves with it. And that's effectively what Melody did when her classmates and her teacher and her administration turned their back on her. You know, Variety does that a lot too, by the way. Variety's a rag, in my opinion. I used to really take what a lot of these critics said to heart, because there used to be a thing in this world called journalistic integrity, but it doesn't exist anymore. And look, I think Disney films for the last couple of years, I think a lot of them have lacked substance. I think a lot of them have missed the mark with certain areas where they could have brought awareness to a platform or to a group of people. I think that Disney obviously has gone out of their way to be inclusive and tell unique stories. Sometimes I think they've put inclusiveness ahead of storytelling and screenwriting, but that's not the case here. And I don't know why Variety would say such a thing like that, other than that might just be Variety not wanting to give Disney their flowers, because a lot of people in Hollywood are sort of over it with Disney because Disney buys everything. I get it. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I don't think that it's fair when you people, like those at Variety and a lot of the other publications out there, pound the table for inclusion. You finally get it. You get it in a beautiful way, and yet you still can't give it what it deserves.
Yeah, you're going to find fault with it. So
what else do you want?
It is so hard to find fault with this movie. I mean, I know I just said that about Diane's character arc, but like that's one little nitpicky thing.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to find fault in the movie. However, it is, for the lack of better term, a period piece. It speaks to the millennial in you and I, certainly. So there's a lot of things to look out for because we lived through this time period. So Where in the Film is brought to you by our friends at Where in the Park, a seek and find card game that you can play in your favorite parks, whether it's Disney or Universal, SeaWorld, or more. Where in the Park challenges you to spot those little details that so many can miss. To order your game packs, visit monoreelradio.com and click our affiliate link for a 10% discount today. It came down to the final shot of this movie for me. One of the final shots. I shouldn't say the final. Maybe like the third to final shot. And I was looking. And I had a couple of like honorable mentions I could have gone with, but I felt that they were weak. When Melody starts her speech to her classroom, what I was drawn to, over her left shoulder, there's a poster on the wall that says, "Think before you speak." And I went, that's it. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
And think being an acronym of, you know, and I'm paraphrasing because none of these letters are in think, but being considerate, thinking of others. I don't remember exactly, but maybe integrity was the I. But the point was, think before you speak because you don't know who you may upset. And that's a microcosm for the entire movie. It's not there by accident. It's not there for set dressing. It wasn't something that they caught by mistake over her shoulder. It is behind her the entire time for a reason. It's brilliant. I love that it's there, and I love that it took me the entire movie to find it.
Amazing catch. I did not notice that, but gosh, that is so perfect. That's incredible. I wish I had gone first because mine is not nearly as profound. But you mentioned the time period, 2002. So one of the things that stood out to me was how perfect the soundtrack was. Starting with the chorus in the very beginning. I loved that song when I was in high school, and I think the rest of the soundtrack was just the perfect reflection of that era. You had Justin Timberlake's first solo album, Post in Sync, in there. I thought the song choices were all on point and worth noting. Linda Perry was the composer for the score. Best known probably for Four Non-Blondes, but she's been doing a lot more lately with film composition. And I love her work more as a composer and a music producer, even than, more than I liked her band. So I thought it was cool that she popped up in this, and she has worked with Jennifer Aniston before on a film called Dumplin'. So kind of a full circle thing.
30-something years later, and they still haven't answered the question. Let's talk about our cast here. Phoebe Ray-Taylor plays Melody Brooks, as you had mentioned earlier. Phoebe Ray-Taylor is an actress. She's British, and she does have CP. I think that, but she is not nonverbal. She's given interviews. I think that it's great that they brought on an actress that has this condition, and so she has this really unique perspective where she knows what it's like to go through this, and she can add so much, like, she's so genuine because she goes through this herself, but it's not pantomime, but it's not over the top, and she is able to do so much with her facial expressions, with her eyes, because she does not have the ability in the film, at least, to speak. Like, her performance is so incredibly powerful. I don't understand, and I will not understand, now that we are in award season, why she didn't get any consideration for a damn thing.
I'm wondering if because it was Sundance, which would have been January of last year, it may not have made the cutoff for 2025. It might have, it probably should have been 2024. But yeah, this is just one of those things where this film is unfairly snubbed, because at the time when she was doing press, there was a lot of buzz surrounding her performance and how not only remarkable it was, but how groundbreaking it was. Because in a lot of films like this, they cast able-bodied people into these roles and deny someone the opportunity to play the part of a character that they will fully understand. Here, they didn't do that because they cast an actress who has cerebral palsy. Not only does she fully understand the condition, she is able to articulate and therefore help the rest of the cast and crew to tell the story more completely, because, this is her life. And I think that's what makes her performance so remarkable is not just because this is what she deals with every single day. It's because she is able to voice her opinion, but she had to show that restraint. So she has to do everything through emoting, through her eyes. And, for somebody who doesn't have that much experience acting, you would think that she's a seasoned veteran. She was just absolutely incredible.
Rosemary DeWitt plays Diane Brooks. I remembered her from the really bad remake of Poltergeist. This character is good by the end of the movie. It took too long to develop her. I think it took too long to make her somebody that does not infuriate you.
But she's a complex character.
She is.
That much I like.
I think you feel bad for her because you can't imagine what she's going through. And she does have layers. I just wish that we would have seen it play out a little bit more. It should not have been my interpretation to make her likable. It's one of the few flaws that I have with the film.
I still disagree with that because I like that they held it. I think it made for better conflict. But where I think it's a credit to the actress is that in those moments in between where she wasn't being the antagonist, where you did have those mother-daughter bonding moments, like in the bathroom before the Whiz Kids show.
Yeah.
Like, that's where she truly shines, where she is having that moment with her daughter, and she is trying to give her daughter a moment of normalcy and just try to let her be a teenager. And when the maternal instinct really shines through, I think she's at her best.
Luke Kirby plays Chuck Brooks, and to me, this is a character that is exactly what I want it to be. He seems like a jerk at first, but you waste no time into introducing the idea that he's not a bad person, that he's not taking it out on his daughter through no reason other than he is just so tired and frustrated on her behalf, and it's misdirected, and everybody's done that before, but they make him on her side, they make him a great father, they make him a great cheerleader for her, and he is one of the most likable people in this film.
I think he's the unsung hero of this film. I think, obviously not only is Melody the lead, but I think that she's just the best character, but he's a very close second because they didn't leave him at the trope of exhausted father who's, just barely holding it together, barely holding his family together, because the performance is so layered with him genuinely wanting to help her, him genuinely hurting for her, and, celebrating the wins with her, but like really feeling the losses. He's a scene stealer. He really is. He's incredible.
So's Judith Light.
So great.
People of our generation will remember her from Who's the Boss with Tony Danza. She is incredible. Mrs. V, I said it before, and I'm putting a stamp on it. She is a top 10. She is a top 10 character.
Other than I'm not fragile, she has the best line in the movie.
110%.
And one of the most poignant.
Courtney Taylor plays Catherine Ray. I love Catherine. I love the interactions that she has with Melody. I love how she is not only an advocate for Melody at school, but she's very much an advocate for Melody in her personal life. She is that teacher that you would have hoped Mr. Dimming would have been.
I also really love that they didn't write her character in a way that was using Melody to prove a point. I think that was very important. And all of those moments in between, like their conversation in the garden, where she really levels with her with how do you really deal with it? Because she sees her personality through it all. It's a credit to the writing. It's a credit to the actress. Yeah, she's just great.
Michael Chernus plays Mr. Dimming. His performance is so good. I love that he is not what you expect him to be. And I just wish that some of his lines would have been delivered earlier, because in a way, what he does is horrible, but as you sort of unpack what he did, there's a part of you that, as mad as you are and as wrong as he was, to a level that's basically unforgivable, you almost still feel bad for this character, because it is a commentary on years ago, and I'm sure to an extent, maybe still to this day, how ill-equipped these teachers were. And at times, it did put the teacher into an unfair corner because they didn't know what to do. And it wasn't fair that you just assumed that they could handle it or teach any student, because no student is like the next. And when you're dealing with kids that really do require, an additional level of attention, and it's not what he was ready to do. He had no prerequisite for it. And the performance is just so good. I just wish that some of his dialogue would have come a little bit earlier on, because it wouldn't have made him a villain. Because other than Claire, there's no real villain in this movie. And I don't think he's supposed to be one, but he sort of becomes one.
I mean, in a film like this, you don't necessarily need an out-and-out villain. They're all antagonists. But to that point, he's a jerk of a character. However, he is so important to the social commentary of what happens when you are able to elevate these kids. It's another obstacle standing in their way if a teacher is not willing to work with them in the capacity that they need. So you definitely needed that piece of the puzzle here. I just wish, as far as from the screenwriting standpoint, that we had a button on his character. More of a reaction from him when Melody stands up to him, and more of he doesn't even get a slap on the wrist, like he needed to have something happen to him career-wise.
I'm wondering, as we talk through this, if he's even supposed to, I know it's going to sound weird, if he's even supposed to be like a real character, or if he's just supposed to be a microcosm of everything that was wrong with the public school system, and at times still is. And I kind of feel like the symbolism of him was more important than him as a human being.
Yeah, because he needed to have something happen. He needed some kind of repercussion.
Maria Nash plays Rose Spencer. I love this character. She did such a great job with this role. This is a character that is layered. This is a character that is conflicted. This is a character that's extraordinarily relatable. I think everything that she did with this character was spot on. I love where they left them. And I love that there was really an apology, and it was it went unsaid, because I think they both knew that ultimately they were very close friends.
I agree. Really, really nuanced performance here from somebody who's very young and still cutting their teeth. And, you really see the internal struggle. You see her wanting to be a 12-year-old who fits in with the cool kids, but you also see her wanting to do the right thing and not ostracize someone because they're different. And she, the way that she plays that discomfort is incredible.
And I do want to point this out too. I'm going to bring up Kate Moyer. She plays Claire. Kate Moyer is probably a lovely girl. This character is awful, and that's not saying that the young actress was awful. The young actress
she
is
was
so
actually
good.
incredible because you
She's
hate
so
her.
Good.
You hate Claire.
That she made this character so awful. You're probably a lovely girl. You did a great job with a horrendous character, and horrendous in all of the right ways. Okay, you know what? It's time. That's
2 hours later.
Okay, look, listen. Do I have a few things that I wish they would have adjusted with the film? Sure do. But you know what? Screw you, Variety. This is a perfect film. I'm giving it perfect marks. This is not only a perfect film, this is the best movie that Disney's made in years. It's absolutely criminal that it didn't get a theatrical release because it doesn't get any Oscar nominations. It doesn't get Oscar consideration because it didn't show on more than a handful of screens at festivals. Shame on you for not promoting it. You talk about inclusivity. This was the way to do it. You didn't. I'm glad it went to the streaming service, but shame on you for not putting more effort into marketing this film, because this should be standardized watching in every school in the country.
Yep.
That's how good this movie is. It takes everything that you expect, it flips it on its head, it makes you laugh, it makes you cry, it makes you happy, it makes you sad. This is one of the best movies this company's ever made. Nobody's talking about it, but I will stand on the hill and I will carry the torch because I think this movie is that good and that powerful.
I couldn't agree more. It's just incredible, left to right, top to bottom. It's great screenwriting. It's incredible execution. And just the message is so important. Honestly, this is must-see TV. This should be required. Disney should honestly have everything else blocked until you watch this, like a training video, an intro to Disney Plus. I agree with you. It's criminal that this did not get more, like it was buzzy, but it was word of mouth buzzy. That's how I remember hearing about it. It wasn't widely marketed enough, which is a travesty because people need to see it. There should have been so much more championing of this film. And I mentioned it before, you have Jennifer Aniston. I understand where she didn't want to overshadow the lead actress because they did cast someone with cerebral palsy. So you don't want to take the attention away from that. But at the same time, you do need to use your platform to get this movie in front of people because it's just so well done. And they managed to utilize all of their teachable moments in a way that's not preachy. This is edutainment at its finest because you are conveying very important lessons, not just to kids. This isn't just a movie that's easily digestible for kids. It is. This is a perfect family movie because there is a takeaway for every single person. This is what this company was built on. This is what this company does best. And that's also one of the things that I love most about this film is that it shows that Disney still got it. And I wish they just would have marketed it as such and put it out there and give it its due and hopefully do more of this. I think that's the biggest key here. Instead of trying to do things like what they did with Strange World and market it one way and bury what the story is about, that's where it causes the uproar from the public because they're either going to feel that they were misled going in and not prepared to deal with some of the themes that are being put in front of their children, or you're just going to make them feel duped and insulted.
And we liked Strange World, by
I
the
loved
way.
Strange World.
I think that was a really good movie.
But that's my point. Instead of trying to bury it like that, because it also makes people feel like it's being force-fed when you're not forthcoming about subject matter.
Isn't it funny that, like, there's this, like, it's almost become, like, organic, which, as I know that is a phrase your father hates, but you have, like, this organic reaction to things being buried going, well, what are they trying to hide from us?
And that's exactly my point. Instead of burying themes like this into the supposed box office success movie, but not advertising it in that way, do what this film does so successfully. Shine a light on it. Make the entire story about it, but figure out a way to make it accessible and relatable to everyone in the audience. And it shouldn't have taken a book being adapted for Disney, freaking Disney, to figure out a way to do that.
You know what? I'm just going to pile on. This review has gone for an awful long time.
Oh,
but
we're
you know
getting
what?
on another soapbox.
Yep. Oh, I'm going to rev some engines right now. I'm not going to make a lot of friends with what I'm about to say. What else is new for Sean? It drives me crazy that Phoebe Ray-Taylor has been given less screen time, less social media time, and less media time than Rachel Zegler. Disney is moving forward with The Disaster Artist, but in real life. This movie, this Snow White movie's a bomb before it was released. They're going to act surprised when it is a bomb. This movie shouldn't even see the light of day. But you're still advertising it. You're still going to have an ad at the Super Bowl. Sorry, the big game. Oops, I'm not allowed to say that. You know, this is what's really going to make people angry. Sorry. If Angel Studios, who made The Sound of Freedom, made this movie on nothing but crowdfunding, they would have got it on more screens. They would have had more targeted social media advertising. They would have had ticket drives. And they would have had a box office for it. The fact that that little studio, whether you like them or not, is a different situation. I'm not telling you should or you shouldn't. But the fact that they would have put more effort into trying to get this film the audience that it deserves, and Disney did nothing for it, but are going to die on the hill of Rachel Zegler, I have a problem with it.
I don't disagree with you, but I can promise that that is not going to be the case with Monoreel Radio, because we are going to champion this film every single chance that we get. I'm going to tell anyone who will listen about it. It's just one of the best things that Disney's ever done, hands down.
For sure. We want to know what you have to say about Out of My Mind. You can send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com, or you can shoot us a DM on all forms of social media at Monoreel Radio. News of the Week is coming up, but first a quick break.
News of the Week is proudly sponsored by KMV Travel. KMV Travel is a boutique travel agency that helps families plan personalized vacations and create unforgettable memories in the happiest place on earth. If you've dreamed of visiting Waltz Park or racing with Lightning McQueen in Cars Land, a KMV Travel specialist will work with you to customize the perfect getaway for you and your family. Your KMV travel advisor will ensure you know the ins and outs of the My Disneyland app, assist with dining reservations, and of course, share their favorite hacks so you can get the most out of your vacation. Visit kmvtravel.com to soar over to California now.
If you're thinking of booking a trip to a Disney destination, you have to contact Jackie Zalezzi. My husband and I recently celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary and wanted to go on a trip, just the two of us. Jackie suggested Disneyland, knowing we'd never been and I had been dreaming of going. I am so thankful for her suggestion, as it was the most magical way to celebrate. Jackie got us a fantastic deal, but still constantly checked for discounts to make sure we were guaranteed the lowest price. Having recently visited Disneyland, she was a great source for helpful information and had suggestions for everything, including meals, Max Pass, even places to visit in Los Angeles on our non-park day. Upon arrival at our hotel, we experienced the easiest check-in because Jackie had taken care of everything. Throughout our trip, Jackie was in constant contact, making sure we had everything we needed and answering any questions we had. Our vacation was perfect.
The nominations were announced for the 97th Academy Awards. Disney was given 15 nominations. 10 of them, 10 nominations went to Searchlight Pictures, 8 of them for A Complete Unknown, which is the Bob Dylan biopic. The other 2 went for A Real Pain. Which, not one for the kiddos, but if you can catch it on Hulu, was actually a really, really strong film.
It's great. Yeah, no, Kieran Culkin deserves everything that's coming his way right now.
Inside Out 2 was nominated for Best Animated Feature. 20th Century Studios got 2 nominations for Best Visual Effects, 1 for Alien Romulus and 1 for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. National Geographic was given a nomination for Best Documentary Feature Film for Sugar Cane. Disney branded television got a nomination for Never Too Late. That is a that is a documentary about Elton John. And let me see what else here. No, I believe that was
I'm surprised that Deadpool and Wolverine didn't put up more numbers in like the sound and visual effects category.
Yeah, I thought that they certainly would have received something there as well. Do you know what doesn't receive Oscar nominations? Films that we pull from my favorite theme of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, What the February has returned.
So I want to let our listeners in on the bit here. I mean, it's no surprise. This is my least favorite thing that we do on Monoreel Radio. I got away with not having to do a What the February last year, but Sean loves it so much. And there's no other big anniversaries to celebrate this February, so I gave you carte blanche. This time, though, usually I'm in on it. You know, I'll go through the titles and I'll see what looks awesomely bad, and you know, we'll each throw in like two. We'll throw two into the ring. This time, I gave you carte blanche, and I mean, this is how hands off I am. I have not even put a movie on the calendar for February. There's nothing on the Google Calendar. I have no idea what's coming up, and I am finding out in real time with you listeners what we're going to be watching. Sean is going to announce them every week, and that's the deal. I'm just going along with it. I have no idea what's coming.
I am so excited. I love What the February.
Gosh.
Because so many people got Disney Plus and saw a tile for a film and went, WTF is this? But I'm going to go ahead and ease us in to What the February this year. They'll progressively get worse, I'm sure. But I want to start with something that slightly more recent.
Oh?
I want to start with something that we talk about films that weren't really advertised very much. I'm going to talk about a film that at the very beginning was advertised quite a bit. A movie that sat on the shelf for a considerable amount of time because Disney seemingly had some problems with it. They didn't know what to do. They buried it and released it during the pandemic.
I don't even think I know what you're talking about.
We talk about something like Deadpool and Wolverine, and this was supposed to be perhaps our first foray into the X-Men. Certainly it was going to be the first foray into the Marvel Cinematic Universe doing a horror film, and I am talking about The New Mutants. We are going to do The New Mutants next week on Monoreel Radio. We've never seen it, and I want to know, WTF happened to The New Mutants? WTF? Why are we burying it? Was it that bad? Because, I mean, the first trailer looked great. The cast seemed exciting. So WTF went wrong.
Okay, this is not at all where I thought we were going. This might not be so bad.
No, I promise it's going to get worse. That is how we are going to start off What the February this year.
Just nothing from the Ron Miller era, please.
I make not one promise. Thank you all so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can help support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcast. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.